Sometimes a love story starts with hope and ends with horror. Sometimes the person you trust most becomes the reason your heartbeat stops. This story begins on a quiet summer night in North Carolina, with a single phone call that would change two families forever. It was 3 a.m. when the Davidson County dispatcher answered a trembling voice on the other end of the line. "My son-in-law got in a fight with my daughter," the man said. "I intervened, and he's in bad shape. We need help." The dispatcher asked what happened, and there was a pause, a heavy breath, and then the words that froze everyone listening. "I may have killed him." That caller was Thomas Martins, a retired FBI agent. The man lying motionless on the bedroom floor was Jason Corbett, a 39-year-old father from Ireland who had crossed an ocean chasing love and a new beginning. To understand that night, we have to go back to where Jason's story began, far away in the green fields of Limerick, Ireland. Jason had been married once before to a woman named Margaret Maggs Fitzpatrick. They were young, happy, and raising two children, Jack and Sarah. But life can turn cruel in an instant. Not long after their daughter's birth, Maggs suffered a sudden asthma attack. She never recovered. At 30, Jason was a widower with two small children. Friends said he was heartbroken but devoted. Everything he did was for those kids. 2 years later, looking for help and stability, he hired a 24-year-old American woman named Molly Martins to work as an au pair. She was cheerful, attentive, and seemed to bring light back into the house. Over time, friendship became romance. In 2011, Jason decided to leave Ireland behind. He moved with Molly and the children to North Carolina, where they married. To friends back home, it sounded like a dream. New country, new wife, new life. But within months, cracks started to show. Jason's sister recalled that Molly could be charming one moment and cold the next. Jason confided that arguments were becoming frequent and that Molly's moods frightened him. Still, he tried to keep the family together. He worked, cooked for the kids, sent pictures back to relatives. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Two smiling parents, a nice house, laughter on the porch. But behind closed doors, tension simmered. Molly wanted to adopt Jack and Sarah. Jason refused. He said he wanted his children to stay Irish citizens and someday return home. He even dreamed of opening a pizza shop near the beach in Ireland's Spanish Point. To Molly, that plan sounded like abandonment. She wanted permanence, control. Neighbors later said that Molly sometimes introduced the kids as her own, and when Jason corrected her, her face would tighten with anger. Little resentments grew into walls of silence. By summer 2015, Jason told friends he was considering taking the kids back to Ireland for good. He didn't realize those words might seal his fate. August 2nd, 2015. The day started normally, but by nightfall, everything would collapse. Jason and Molly argued upstairs. Her parents, Thomas and Sharon Martins, were staying over. According to Thomas, he was asleep when he heard a commotion, thuds, shouting, a woman's cry. He grabbed a baseball bat and rushed toward the sound. Inside the bedroom, he said he saw Jason with his arm around Molly's neck. "He's going to kill her," Thomas claimed. Acting on instinct or anger, he swung the bat. Once, twice, again, and again. When police arrived minutes later, Jason's body was crumpled on the carpet, his head and shoulders covered in blood. The walls, the floor, the bedspread, everything was splattered red. The scene stunned even veteran officers. One later said he'd never witnessed so much blood in a single room. The medical examiner couldn't count the number of strikes because Jason's skull had been shattered in multiple places, at least a dozen heavy blows from a bat, and, bizarrely, from a decorative brick that Molly said she kept by the bed for an art project. Both Molly and her father insisted it was self-defense. They told detectives Jason was violent, controlling, a man with a temper. They said Molly feared for her life. But investigators quickly saw problems. Thomas had no marks consistent with fighting off a stronger man. Molly's injuries were minor, and none looked like strangulation. Paramedics arriving just 9 minutes after the 911 call found Jason's body already cold, suggesting the attack had happened much earlier than reported. Detectives also learned Jason's relatives in Ireland had received troubling messages. He'd told them Molly could be volatile, that he sometimes feared her anger, and that he was preparing documents to bring his kids home. He even wrote to a friend, "If anything happens to me, look to her." When police spoke with Jack and Sarah, the children repeated Molly's story, that their father yelled, that he was mean. But after returning to Ireland months later, both recanted. They said Molly had told them what to say, rehearsed it until they remembered every line. "She told us Daddy was bad," one of them said, "but he wasn't." 2 years later, in 2017, the trial began. Cameras waited outside as reporters called it the Irishman's murder in America. Inside, two stories collided, one of self-defense and fear, the other of jealousy and control. Prosecutors described a brutal killing, not a struggle. They argued that Thomas Martins, a trained FBI veteran, knew exactly how to build a self-defense narrative. He and his daughter had time to call for help before the fatal blows, but they didn't. Instead, Jason was beaten long after he was down. The defense painted Jason as a domineering husband who snapped. They played audio of Thomas's calm 911 call and pointed to his spotless FBI record. But when jurors saw the crime scene photos, blood soaking the carpet, splashes up the wall, one juror turned pale and asked for a recess. It took the jury less than 4 hours. Both Thomas and Molly Martins were found guilty of second-degree murder. Each received a sentence of 20 to 25 years. Jason's family wept. For them, justice had finally spoken. In a statement read aloud, 13-year-old Jack said, "Molly will never be part of my family. She will always be remembered as a murderer." Those words echoed through the courtroom like a verdict of their own. For a while, that seemed to be the end. But justice in America can twist and turn. In 2021, the North Carolina Supreme Court reviewed the case and ruled that certain evidence of Jason's alleged temper should have been allowed in the first trial. The convictions were overturned. Jason's children, now older, promised to testify again if a new trial came. They were ready to face the people who had taken their father's life. But never happened. Instead, Thomas and Molly accepted a plea bargain, voluntary manslaughter. Their new sentence, 51 to 74 months. Barely 6 years. Since they had already served nearly that long, they walked free in 2024. The reaction was outrage. Sheriff David Grice, who had worked the original case, said, "They spent enough money on appeals until the courts got worn down." To Jason's sister, it felt like betrayal all over again. But the most powerful response came from Jason's daughter, Sarah Corbett. Standing outside the courthouse, now a young woman, she said, "I am no longer a child who can be manipulated." Despite serving their sentence, the repercussions of their actions will last forever. The truth, known by all involved, will eventually come to light. Her voice trembled, but not from fear, from determination. Because this story isn't only about a killing. It's about how love can twist into possession, how grief can open the door to danger, and how justice can feel unfinished even when the case is closed. Jason Corbett came to America hoping to rebuild his life. Instead, he became another headline in the true crime archives, a father who trusted the wrong person. For his children, the scars remain, but so does the love he gave them. Every memory, every photograph, every laugh from their childhood belongs to him, not to the people who tried to rewrite the story. When you look at the facts, the cold body, the blood-soaked room, the coached words of two frightened kids, you realize something haunting. Maybe the truth was simple all along. Maybe there was no monster in that room except fear and pride. Tonight, somewhere in Ireland, Jason's family still lights a candle for him. They remember the man who told bedtime stories, who danced in the kitchen, who dreamed of the sea. His children are grown now, and when they speak of him, their eyes shine, not with tears but with strength, because telling the truth became their way of keeping him alive. And that's what this case leaves behind, a reminder that justice isn't just about courts and sentences. It's about who carries the truth when the noise fades. Jason Corbett's story will always ask one question that no verdict can answer. How far will people go to keep control over the ones they claim to love? Maybe that's why this tragedy still lingers. Because at its heart, it isn't only a murder, it's a warning. Love without trust can become obsession. Obsession without empathy can become violence. And violence, once unleashed, can destroy more than one life. It can haunt generations. So the next time you hear a calm voice on a midnight 911 call, remember this story. Remember that behind every measured word, there might be a storm of secrets. Jason Corbett's name deserves to be remembered, not as a victim, but as a father who loved fiercely and paid the ultimate price for trusting too deeply. And maybe in the quiet moments when his children speak the truth out loud, that love finally wins.